record here real quick. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Rex.
Hi.
Hi, Julie.
How are you both?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to having a really great conversation with Rex tonight.
Perfect. How about you, Rex?
I'm doing very well. Sitting
Excellent.
here in Del Mar,
Love
close to where the novel takes place.
Fantastic. And dealing with this time change. I don't know about you two, but the time change, I just wish we could pass where we don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, one can hope, right?
Right, exactly. I'm gonna fill a little bit of time to give Facebook a minute or two just to notify people that we are here and we're live with both of you. Just a little bit about Warwick's. Not sure where everybody's joining in from tonight. I'm assuming a lot of San Diego, a lot of local Southern Californians, so people might know about Warwick's, but for those that don't, my little sign there says 1896. We're actually celebrating our 125th anniversary this year. So yeah, thumbs up to that. Warwick's is not the oldest bookstore in the country, but oldest continuously family owned. So Nancy Warwick is the 4th generation owner. So we're actually, if you're not doing anything, you two, on November 21st, we're having an open house and going to drink some champagne and celebrate. So come on down to Warwick's for anybody that's watching out there too. Tonight's conversation between Lisa and Rex is going to be about a half hour-ish. I'm going to be putting and talking to you in the comment section of Facebook. If you're watching this on YouTube after, it's not live on YouTube, but you can still, I will be putting into the Facebook link, a link there that you can order Rex's book, The Archivist, from us. Who's got a copy of it? Lisa, you got a copy you can show us? There it is. I love that cover. Such a great cover. So we'll put that, if you're in San Diego, we would love for you to stop by the store. You can select that when you're ordering the book, or we can ship you anywhere in the United States. So one of the things I always like to say on these is anywhere there is to get a book, you can actually get it from Warwick's, and we actually will ship things to you. So there are other alternatives out there. So also for tonight, like I said, they're going to chat for about 30 minutes. In that comment section of Facebook, if you have any questions for Rex, go ahead and pop those into the comment section. I'll be bringing those in after they're done chatting. So don't be shy and make sure that you get some questions in. So I'm going to introduce these two, and then I'm going to go away and let the conversation begin. So Rex Pickett is a California-based screenwriter and author who is most well known for writing Sideways, the book that became one of the most critically acclaimed and highest grossing comedy films in Hollywood history. The screenplay for the film was named one of the top 100 screenplays of all time by the Writers Guild of America, while the movie itself was nominated for 5 Oscars, winning Best Adapted Screenplay, and 7 Golden Globes, winning Best Screenplay and Best Picture. Rex also wrote for the Oscar-winning Best Live Action Short, My Mother Dreams, The Satan's Disciples in New York, and his Sideways sequel, Vertical, won the gold medal for popular fiction from the Independent Publisher Book Awards. The Rex Pickett papers are in archives at Giesel Library on the campus of his alma mater, UC San Diego. Like he said, he resides here in Del Mar, California, and he's here tonight to talk to us about his new book, The Archivist. Joining him today is Lisa, is it Fugard?
Fugard.
Fugard. Sorry about that. I meant to ask you that earlier. Fugard. Lisa was born in South Africa and came to the United States in 1980. After working in theater, performing in New York, London, and South Africa, she turned her attention to writing. Her short stories have been published in Story, Outside, and numerous literary magazines. Her many travel articles, essays, and book reviews have appeared in the New York Times. Her first novel, Skinner's Drift, a powerful story of family secrets set in the harshly beautiful landscape of rural South Africa, was named a notable book of 2006 by New York Times. Skinner's Drift was also a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Art Seidenbaum Award for First Fiction, and the runner-up for the 2007 Dayton Literary Peace Prize. With her colleague, Wendy Lynn Harris, she teaches the popular series of Writers Boot Camp courses. She too lives in Southern California and is currently working on her second novel. You two have a great conversation. Lisa, take it away.
All righty, great.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Julie. All right, Rex. What I thought I'd do is just start by reading a little bit from the jacket here, just so that readers, listeners and your potential readers understand a little bit of the terrain of the novel, and then we can start talking, all right? Okay. So, because I don't want to give away any spoilers here. All right. When archivist Nadia Fontaine is found dead of an apparent drowning, Emily Snow is hired by Regent's University to finish the job she started, to organize and process the papers of Raymond West, a famous Pulitzer Prize winning author who has been shortlisted for the Nobel. As Emily sets to work on the West papers, it begins to dawn on her that several items have gone missing from the collection. To trace their whereabouts, she gains unsupervised access to the highly restricted dark archives, in which she opens a Pandora's box of erotically and intellectually charged correspondence between Raymond West and the late Nadia Fontaine. I got goosebumps reading that. So what I wanted to tell you, Rex, is that you gave me one of the really great pleasures in reading a book, which was maybe like, the last 30, 40 pages, when it was just, moving to the climax. I kept like wanting to read faster and faster, and then also kept putting the book down because I didn't want it to end. And so there was sort of this dance between my excitement and eagerness at wanting to know who, what, how, why, and also just not wanting the story to end. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
I guess what I wanted to just start with is, I think, I'm always curious, and I know that listeners and readers are, is, what's the genesis of the book? Now, I know that you actually donated your papers, the papers from Sideways and, your other projects to the Geisel Library, and I think it was 2013. And then at some point you met your archivist. And I'm just very curious as to what, if you can look back and identify the spark or the idea that got you interested in this profession and actually just sort of, kicked off the novel for you.
Well, in 2012, I got an offer to go to the country of Chile to write Sideways 3 Chile. And I'd been living in LA for 2.5, almost 3 decades in this barbarous world of Hollywood. People think I'm a novelist, but I really come more from film and filmmaking. I've written and directed 2 feature films. And I looked at my apartment. I said, you know what, I'm going to give it up. I'm going to leave. And I literally donated all my books, which was a huge book collection. And that was difficult for me. And I'd been offered by the director of special collections and archives to take my papers, as they say. I've got the terminology down now because I've taught this to the archivists. And I thought now was the right time. So they said to me, oh, okay, just drop them down at this loading dock at Geisel Library. And the library has a lot of meaning for me because I spent a lot of time there in my youth. UCSD built for the future, and they built this huge library. And often I was all alone in this 8-story library. Today, of course, it's overrun with thousands of students. So me and an intern, a paid intern, by the way, we drove down literally 50 boxes of my writings and film and discs and everything to this loading dock where there was this guy with a forklift, and I figured they were just gonna take out a Sharpie and put Pickett and put it in cold storage. But it was kind of an emotional moment because I'd left to go to LA with 5 boxes of some minimal writing, and I returned with 50 boxes from LA. No, because I grew up here in San Diego. I went to the University of California in San Diego, and then I left to go off to LA. And I had literally, I had no children, nothing. This was my life, these 50 boxes. But I was happy they were going to take them. And so went to Chile, went to New York, and so they were going to do Sideways the play, which I wrote at La Jolla Playhouse, and and they held a dinner in my honor. And I was asked about that. I said, well, how do you feel about your work being taken? And I didn't really know what had happened with it. And I said, well, it's cheaper in public storage. And, I thought I was making a joke, but, there was kind of a little bit of an unsettled laugh. And at the end of the event, there were people up getting autographs from me and from Sideways. And this woman came up to me, this striking woman, and she said, hi, I'm Kate. I'm your archivist. And I can't, it's hard for me to convey what that was. I never had put a person to my papers, and it was almost like somebody had thumped my chest with a karate tipped dart. I was stunned. I was nonplussed, like, oh my God. And then she said, would you like to come down and see what we've done? And I said, yeah, I would. I didn't know what an archivist did. I didn't know what having your work, I didn't even know what it meant, honestly. And so I came the next day or day after and met Kate in her offices in this warren of offices, and she took me down into what are called the stacks. And it's where, and then, and she showed me these beautiful gray document boxes, all with typewritten Rex Pickett papers on them, and they stretch, for X number of linear feet.
Right.
And I mean, I was overwhelmed. I was, I think tears fogged my eyes. I couldn't believe it. Like there's your life's work, and somebody had taken this kind of care. And I said, how long did this take you to do? And there's still a dispute about this. I like to think it was a half a year. She says 4 months, but but I said, well, did you read everything? And she goes, yeah, almost everything, because not everything from beginning to end, but I read a lot of it because I had to know what it was to process and organize and get it in the boxes and create a finding aid and all these now terminologies I now know, Lisa. And I said, wow. And I said, I'd like to talk to you more about that process. I said, this is somebody who read journals that I hadn't read in 30 years. I said, you know me better than I do. And then I said something kind of poetic. I said, you're my eavesdropping angel, And after I used that line, I was so, I can't tell you, I went to LA and I came back, and that's the long and short of it. That will be in my 3-volume autobiography called My Life on Spec, but that's another story. And I was so overwhelmed with emotion, and that this one person had actually spent this time. This is very personal work, what I do, Lisa. I know all writers and artists like to think it's personal, but in my case, I write from a very personal place. And here's somebody who went inside and took that time. And so I started to talk to her about her profession and the kinds of things that are, that they find in a collection, and the choices that they make about what, sometimes to present to you, to present, that they might think are going to get ordered to be shredded or whatever. I don't know. I started to become fascinated by the profession, but it was really, and I wrote an article about it. It's going to come out in Crime Reads Lit Hub, and it's called From Emotion to Conception. So to me, the emotion was there. I was overwhelmed with emotion about what an archivist had actually done to my work.
Well, it's interesting because one of the pleasures of reading this book is, and aside from the very intense, sort of mystery thriller aspect, because there really is this journey of this kind of plunging like deeper and deeper and deeper into this, this sort of the subterranean sort of, the vaults of all the characters. But what I thought you did so beautifully is you really open a window into this profession and this world that we know nothing about. And who knew that archivists could be reading about this could be so thrilling, right? And it's really interesting the way you describe about the emotional impact that you got when you looked at the collection, what Kate had put together, because that comes across in the book. There's such an intimacy between Emily and Raymond, and it just seems like an archivist is eavesdropping, angel, a confessor, a lawyer who's going to keep secrets, a priest who's sworn to secrecy. So there's all these interesting elements that you bring in through this profession, and then there's at one moment where a character actually destroys a piece from the archives, and it's just a thrilling moment because we care so much. But the other thing that really struck me that I wanted to ask you about is, this is a book about creativity, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, within Sideways, you've got Miles Raymond, who's, writing his book, trying to write his book, trying to finish his book. Here you've got Raymond West, who's just sort of, hit a wall. And I'm curious to actually just know a little bit about your process and how you went about writing this. I think that, we have this beautiful book, 700 pages, but I want to know what you did and where you started and what your drafts were like. And, did you hole up somewhere to work on it, as, Raymond West does in the novel? He holds up in a place in Del Mar. So if you could just sort of open a window a little on your experience as a writer.
Well, something, a flare went off in my head when I met Kate down in the stacks, and I saw my work, and I was overcome with emotion. And, I'm going to quote a writer saying, writers are like thieves. We're always working. We're always drawing on material. Maybe I've been trying to move away from, Miles Raymond in Sideways, Paul Giamatti, there's 2 sequels to that. And, so the more I talked to Kate, and investigated and actually almost interrogated her, if you want to know the truth about her profession. And she said, some interesting things to me, but one of them was, she said a lot of stuff is out on the dark archives. And that was like a very poetic to me, because I'm trying to find the story, Lisa. I'm trying to find, there's going to be a romance. There's at some point I made a leap that archivists are almost like detectives, that they actually, they go into these worlds. And of course, I'm a huge fan of mysteries, and particularly like if you take Raymond Chandler's The Long Goodbye, it's really him trying to escape the Philip Marlowe character. It's not really a whodunit. It's really about being betrayed by a friend. It's really about betrayal. It's not really a whodunit. And I'm also a huge fan of tragic romances. So
got both of those.
So Emily's predecessor, who is, died in a ostensibly accidental drowning. We don't want to give too much away. And so, to me, I've always loved the English Patient. So for whatever, I'm trying to think, and I'm moving in that direction. I'm trying to find the story and the narrative. And I thought, wait a second, archivists are kind of like detectives. And also, I'll tell you something else too, and I hope people don't take this wrong listening to it. I'm getting sick of TV, and I come from film and
Right.
mostly film, but TV a little bit too. I'm getting sick of cops, lawyers, doctors, FBI profilers. I mean, that's fine. I'm sure there's some great books, but it's just an absolute plethora. It's almost like a genre, serial killers.
Right.
Why can't archivists? They're standing at the precipice of truth. They are literally preserving the historical record. And in her case, in this novel, it's really the historical record of this individual. And you talked about, going back to the creative process, what she stumbles upon, and I don't think this is giving too much away, is that her predecessor and Raymond West were having an affair. And
Right.
it is, and this is, and Kate said, I said, okay, big deal. And she goes, oh no, that's highly unethical. And then she explained why. And I go, whoa, okay. Now it's getting interesting for me. It's unethical.
Right.
And they were madly in love. And he's basically Raymond West. He's writing a screenplay. He's burned, he's jaded. He's pretty much given up. And she lights a fire under him. But I didn't want her to be amused. They're co-writing a book together,
Right.
And she's a writer in her own right. And she's somebody who, she's a decorated archivist, and she paid a price in a way. And Emily really, again, I don't want to give it away, but she resurrects this. But now she's holding on to this truth. And I'm trying to find something that other archivists, I'm hoping there are other archivists watching this, they're standing literally at that precipice of truth. And they could either take it to their supervisor, to the director of special, and they might just say, get rid of it. The estate might not want it in there. And there are cases of this, and there are many more stories of, and bear in mind too, the other thing I also love was Emily Snow, the protagonist. She's only 27. So it's kind of a Bildungsroman too, in some ways, Lisa, and I think you would agree with that. And she comes in as the lone gunslinger into the town, and she literally finds the wrongs. And then she actually rights the wrongs. And that's where it gets kind of sophisticated, because she's actually she's putting her career at risk. She's putting her whole life at risk. And so as far as the creative process goes, I think she sees something deeper. Once she's now apprised of this relationship in these salacious emails, and they can go to the salacious, I think she actually, there's two immersions. There's your immersion in the third person narrative of Emily Snow.
Right.
And then there's her immersion into Nadia Fontaine's story, which is written in first person. And I know some people are going to say the novel's long and everything, and I know it is, but I've got to get into two immersions,
Right. Well, what I loved about the two immersions was that, in a way, I felt as a reader that I was going through an archive. You know what I mean? There's almost an experience of me, because you have Emily Snow in the third person, you have Nadia, but then you also have Emily's journals in there. So there's this kind of like, as a reader, I'm also making this, sort of this journey of discovery. So I thought that was really successful. But Emily Snow, she does it at great cost and great peril to herself and her sanity, and
thank you, Lisa.
Hugely so. I mean, this is so, and I thought that was really, really striking and sort of, a heart pounding at places. But I'm curious, this is the first time that you've actually, I think, I mean, I'm not that familiar with your film work, but you're writing from a female protagonist, you're writing from a female point of view. And I mean, I think sometimes stories arrive and that's who shows up, that's the voice, and we do it. And I was wondering if at any point did you have a moment of going, oh, look, I'm writing from a female point of view, or is it just the voice? Did that voice just take you?
Well, first of all, I mean, and we'll go back to the creative process in a second. I mean, Kate in many ways is the archivist. She's kind of both archivists. I mean, fictionally, of course.
Right.
She inspired me. She took me into that world. She mostly does, literary collections. There's other archivists and records managers who do other things, institutional stuff. That doesn't interest me as much, although it might in future novels. And so, it was always going to be a woman because of Kate. It's as simple as that. And also, archivists are predominantly women, and then obviously because it's easier for me to get into, I'm not as successful as Raymond West, admittedly, but I do have a little bit of, I've touched a little bit of that, at Oscars and other stuff. So I kind of understand that fame and being burned out in some ways. And so that was going to be a woman. I think the hard decision was, would I write her the Nadia story in first person or not? And so anyway, but I want to back up quickly because I actually wrote it. I was going to write a pilot for a limited series, an 8-episode limited series. So I wrote the pilot and with Kate. I mean, literally, she's co-credited on, and I was so swept up on it. And at the time, I was kind of living out of hotels and stuff, and blah blah blah. And I wrote it on the 8th floor of the library where the whole thing, I literally would go up there and literally put in my AirPods and have some thermoses. And I literally wrote I was so swept up in the pilot that I wrote all 8 episodes, 535 screenplay pages, literally with Kate. I mean, I did the writing, but so many of the ideas in there are hers. And so in talking about writing about women, I only read women authors at that time because I always read at night when I'm writing. I would not read any male authors. And I read Clarice Lispector, the great, Brazilian, but she's actually Ukrainian, but anyway, and she writes, to get into kind of that emotional landscape of women. I had a woman line editor from Blackstone, and I only wanted women involved. I only wanted to talk to women, to be quite frank with you. And although I did talk to a couple men archivists and I got some interesting, stories. But so I wrote the 8-episode thing, and I got done. I was like, wow, I mean, nobody does that on spec, Lisa, in Hollywood. You don't write all episodes. And I sent it to my agent, and just before he could come back to me, I got a call from Rick Bleiweiss at Blackstone Publishing. He said, Rex, we're an audiobook. They did all 3 of my Sideways audiobooks. And he said, we're now a full-scale publisher. Do you have anything? I said, here's the deal, Rick. Listen carefully. I just adapted a novel that I didn't write into an 8-episode thing, but I would like to write that novel now.
You did the reverse.
Yeah, I did it reverse. I literally adapted a novel that I had ideated as a potential novel, but I decided to write it as a screenplay because you can do, and I've written more screenplays than novels actually, but and he said, okay. And we just literally just did the deal right there. And then I sat down and I girded my loins. I talked to Kate, and she's a huge part of this. I said, you can have a co-credit on the novel. She wouldn't take that, but I sat down and I kind of went into Kazuo Ishiguro's famous The Crash that he wrote. The Remains of the Day.
Drowning. Well, Raymond West, he calls that process of just immersing himself in the work and getting that draft out. It's called the drowning.
Ishiguro wrote The Remains of the Day, his legacy work. He's a Nobel laureate in 28 days. And he literally wrote all day. He just didn't see. And so I needed Raymond and Nadia to have this kind of compressed time that they could write it. So, and in fact, actually, that was Kate's idea. She drew my attention to that. And I sat down and I wrote, and the novel's long. It's actually only 640 pages, but because I'm gonna get hammered for that. But I wrote it in 90 days.
And were you in the library? Did you write it in the library?
No. Now I'm in Del Mar. I'm on my couch. I got up. But bear in mind, at that point, the novel for me it's like a river. It's like a river of a narrative in my head, and all I have to do is put the inner tube in there. I'm not. There are changes and stuff that had to be made from the screenplay. The screenplay had some luxuries, which
Right.
is, for instance, when you go back a year in time to Nadia Fontaine's first person story, all you have to do is say 1 year earlier and you're there.
Right.
It's different where you have,
Yeah.
you know, in a novel, you got to take her back there. Then the big decision is, am I going to write her in first person? And actually, my line editor and Kate, both of them, said, no, I think you should. I was scared about it.
100%. Yeah, it's
And
wonderful.
I said to him, if there's anything that doesn't ring true about a woman and the way a woman thinks or whatever, tell me. And I took every one of those suggestions. But I wanted to differentiate their voices. So we have close third for Emily, and
Yeah.
that's the bigger story. And then we have first person for Nadia. And I wanted to really personalize her story in a way, because hers is a tragic love story. And anyway.
So I wanted to ask you, because I know we want to have some time for questions, and I'm sure we're going to have, quite a few.
All right, my God, this is flying by. You were giving me the baseball signals.
I'm so sorry, Rex. I was like swept up.
Okay.
I can't decide which question I want to ask. Okay, I'm going to go with, it's a mystery. Did you have to like mysteries and thrillers? They're very different animals from Sideways. Was that a challenge for you? Did you, I want to hear about that.
Well, actually, in Sideways, Miles has a novel he can't get published.
Right.
That was really Rex, who had a novel, who had an agent, and it was a mystery novel that I couldn't get published. I had all these rejection letters. It was called La Prisma. And in fact, if it had been published, as you know, because you are in the publishing world, they would contract for the next 2 in the series. There would have been no Sideways, and I would have been happy. I would have been doing that mystery series, but it didn't get published. So that's Miles. So I've written.
I didn't know that. So
my second feature film, which was a great script, but not a great movie, and that's another Zoom podcast, and it'll probably take up half of my autobiography, but that was a mystery too, from Hollywood to Broadway. Yeah, so I have a predilection for mysteries. I'll tell you why, because I'm not really interested again in the whodunit, in the gumshoe part of it. I'm really more interested in the bigger themes that come out about money and power. Those are very much part of the Archivist too. And there's also
hugely so. Yeah.
And why people kill. I mean, they kill for money, they kill for love, and those are big themes to me. But the mystery gives you that kind of, I almost want to say, that foundation in a way to get inside, because you don't want to exclude the reader, and by having a mystery, you draw the reader in. But I think for this first book, hopefully there'll be other ones, but for the first one, I really needed to lay the foundation of the profession. So I do take time in the opening. I like to believe that things dovetail. And as you said, that I pay off everything in the second half, but
100%. I mean, the other thing that I really loved about it, and I also just want to check that we've got time for questions. But the other thing that I really loved is it's San Diego, and so anybody who lives here is going to recognize places, parts of our our culture, our land, and I was really taken with the library. The work you did with that wonderful library with its brutalist countenance and the fire season and reflections in windows. I mean, it really was a presence, and it reminds me of something that somebody once told me about how we think plot is just what a character does, but plot's really like the nervous system of the entire novel. And it's also about culture and place and environment. And I just felt like the work that you did with the library, with Regents, with that culture was really rich, really added a lot.
Well, I mean, I have one, because I get asked a lot of questions about writing and other stuff. And I have a word, it's verisimilitude, the ring of truth. I like to believe you're in that world. I like that you can smell it and you can see it and whatever. And, a lot of things I read that, they're absent of that sometimes. And so I want to really set you in this world so you see it and you really feel it in a way, and then you will believe everything else, I hope, that transpires from there.
Yeah.
It's very important. It's very important to me. And I know you live down here, so you probably recognize some things. And of course, the library, which it's based on Geisel Library, is one of the most extraordinary, iconic libraries. I mean, everyone listening to this, Google, Geisel Library.
Can I tell you something? I just Googled it right before we spoke, because I was quite happy to have the sort of its presence through your words and through my imagination. And then I Googled it, and what you created, it just was mapped beautifully.
I mean, go back, I hate to even say the year, but let's go back to, 70s when I'm a student. I mean, like I said, they built to the future, and that library, it's 8 stories and nobody would be in there. I'd be on the 7th floor, which was all literature, all by myself. And I mean, some extremely lonely, but just also, I mean, I left the surfing culture that I grew up in. I literally just walked away from it when I went to school, and I spent so much time, I mean, also immersed myself in film too, in literature and books. And it was a time of deep immersive reading. So maybe I wrote a book that's about deep immersive, it requires deep immersive reading, but also I also want to bring up the audiobook narrator, because I just did an article on her. I really think deep immersive listening may be actually aiding deep immersive reading, because we can listen. And Caroline Hewitt, who did it, she did an incredible job, narrating it. I've gotten to hear it. And of course, it's released tonight or tomorrow. Yeah. You'll be able to get it. I urge you, if you have trouble with a 640-page book in your lap,
listen.
Literally, I mean, no, sir. And she really brings it to life in just such a wonderful way. And you can kind of let yourself go to it in some ways. I found that with audiobooks, when I talk to people, the longer the better, they say. But with printed, sometimes there's, it's more of a challenge, but they're not the same. Deep immersive reading and that audiobook will continue to go, even if your mind wanders, where your book will stop because it takes the mind, whatever. But I'm so happy that I got to choose Caroline, and out of auditions, because I didn't on my first 3 Sideways. And I realized this is a huge choice. I listen to audiobooks. I actually really do. And it makes a difference who reads them and who doesn't. They can take you out of a book. And she did such a beautiful job. And so I urge them to do that. But thank you about that. This is home for me. This is place. And place for me it puts the reader in a 3-dimensional world, the same way, I know you have a lot of experience in theater. And we won't go down that road, but I have some with my Sideways play. And, it's so alive. It's so 3-dimensional. It's what's so incredible about theater. And I try to get that, in fact, with Sideways, Alexander Payne said, Rex, it was an easy adaptation because he thinks like a screenwriter. I think about scenes and dialogue and place. I don't go off into abstraction too much in some ways. And I tried to do that with The Archivist, because screenplays or a limited series, it's going to be scene driven. It's going to be scene and character and dialogue driven. And so I like to think that that's also kind of a hallmark of what I do,
Well, bravo, Rex. Here it is again.
Well,
so I'm just wondering, do we have any questions, Julie?
We've got some questions. We've got some great comments too. So Rex, the comments I'm not going to read now. Go back to our Facebook page and look at it, because you got a lot of good love out there for this and for you. Okay. So lots of fun out there. So on our Facebook page, go out and look at this afterwards.
I said actually, when we did the first workshop version of my play at Ruskin, a little 50-seat theater, I didn't know if it was going to work. It was going to be 15 performances. It ran 100. And I was there every night, and we poured high-end wine. I said I got more love there every night than I did my entire childhood. So I'm going to go to your Facebook. I'm going to go to that, and I could use some more love.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good stuff going on. Okay. And one of the comments, and what I wanted to, and I forgot to mention this earlier, we're actually doing this the day before official on sale. So that is official on sale is tomorrow.
Actually officially on sale tonight, 9:00 Pacific Standard, because they start at midnight. So you could download your audiobook at 9:00 in California. And I can't stress to you enough. I hope Caroline's listening, but she just did such a great job on the audiobook.
Yeah.
And
you're so right about that.
She hoisted my words to another level.
Yeah, they can make or break a book.
That's what great actresses do. Yep. They take your words and you almost want to cry, but
yeah.
And there's other times you cry for another reason, but that's another story.
That's another story. I do think we need to have you back, because in the green room, we were talking about good coffees in San Diego and beers. I think that we've got a whole series that we could do with you too.
I would love to.
I think there's a whole thing that we could do.
This is my only social life.
I know, us too right now. It's like a little nuts. Anyway, so Vincent, and his first thing wasn't really a question. He was talking about when you were first talking about your papers going into the archive at the library there. And he said, your life's work to that point, there is still life to live. So I was thinking, can you add more to an archive, or once it's done, is it kind of done? Or do you know what,
or you mean they're going to put my work in cold storage and then I'm next?
But
No, no.
as you have new stuff coming, like
I mean, you realize how much I've done since 2013. We've got Sideways the play. There's also now Sideways the musical, and I wrote the book and the lyrics, and all the songs are done. I've obviously got the Archivist,
right?
All the drafts of that, not to mention Sideways 3 Chile. So yes, there's a new accession. You can keep doing new accessions to it. If that, and I know Vinny, he's a friend of mine. He's actually a therapist and a wonderful, wonderful guy. And we text, and he helps me through low moments. I have to be honest with you, for free.
So there is, it's kind of a living thing then. It's not just, it doesn't just stop.
Well, Julie, do I look dead?
No.
Yeah, no, okay, no, it is, and I don't mean to be facetious.
No, that's okay. I'm all good.
And you know, and they'd asked me way back in 2005, and I didn't give the collection over until 2012. But yeah, it's an ongoing thing. So
Got it.
Of course.
Excellent. Okay, so is the idea that both Miles and Raymond were ready to, quote, give up, inspired by your own life experience?
Good question.
Well, Miles Raymond is one character, you know, but yeah, no. When I wrote Sideways, are you kidding me? I mean, I was living on fumes. I had process servers knocking on the door, you know, which I have great advice for in my autobiography. Just don't answer. It was a brutal time, and I literally just I wore my heart on my sleeve. I threw in everything in the kitchen sink. I didn't care. But I did say this to myself: if I'm going to write about, and there's a long story about how we came to Sideways and going up to the San Ynez Valley and where it took place, and that world has totally changed. Is if I'm going to write about despair, because that's where I was at, I need to find the comedy in it, you know, and there's a sort of a mordant humor in there that Miles, and actually in many ways, the play is funnier. I love the movie. Don't get me wrong. We're here because of the movie, but you know, the play in some ways is even funnier because the play goes back to my novel. It's an adaptation of the novel by me. And it's, you know, there, you can go to more melodramatic moments in theater than you can in film. And there are more melodramatic moments in there. And for me, yeah, I was literally, I had nothing. I was at an age where I could not reinvent myself at all. And frankly, I've joked many times, if I could have afforded a gun, I would have shot myself. But I couldn't afford a gun. That's how broke I was. And that's when I wrote Sideways, seriously, you know, in that moment. And I'd have those 3 hours of levitational stuff that Lisa knows, and probably you too do, Julia, you know, if you write. And then when it's over, it's like, now I've got so many other things going on. But then it's like, oh my God, I look around. It was like, I was scared of life. You know, how am I going to pay the rent and everything? But for those 3 hours every day, I was in that flow. And I wrote that first draft in 9 weeks. And wrote a second draft, gave it, my agent loved it, and one or two other people just absolutely loved it. And my ex-wife told me to burn it. And she's an Oscar winner, and she's the chair of NYU, just School of the Arts. But anyway, that hurt my feelings. I disappeared and went on a bender for 3 days. But my agent said she was wrong, and so they went out with it, and nobody wanted it. I mean, we went out to both film, TV, and into publishing, and nobody wanted it. In fact, the rejection letters from publishing, which are in my archive. So archivists, they hold on to the truth of all these senior editors, and they write them to your agent. Dear Mitchell, why did you send me this total piece of shit? I mean, and you got to read this. Rex, chin up, he would write. Chin up. You know,
how do you do that?
So it was a really, really brutal time. And it was a year before Alexander Payne read it. Took a year. And really the person owed is his assistant, Brian Beery. He doesn't get the credit he deserves. He read it first and gave it to Alexander and said, you have got to read this. And the rest is actually history at this point. But nobody in film and publishing wanted that book. Nobody.
Isn't that crazy? They just didn't know. Which brings a question from Carol. Are you done with writing any Sideways books?
No, I have a deal right now to go to New Zealand to write Sideways for New Zealand. However, now that I have Lisa here, it could be Sideways 5 South Africa, because they have incredible wine.
You should know the bottles I bought back from the.
Hey, you gotta, okay, I don't write on spec anymore. You gotta make that happen, because I actually read a great article by Jay McInerney, Mr. Bright Lights Big City, who's a huge fan. He anthologized some of Sideways. and he wrote an article on the wine country in South Africa, and it just made me want to go so badly. And I know you just got back, and I heard it's just staggeringly beautiful. So obviously what I did in my Sideways sequel Vertical was I went to Willamette Valley, which is huge in Pinot Noir. Sideways 3 Chile, I went to Chile, I fell in love. I've got 4 wines coming out from Chile. The Pinot Noir is already in this country. So, I'm trying to, who knows, if I don't make it on books, I'll make it on wine. But I'm supposed to go to New Zealand. It's been a deal in the works for a year and a half, but COVID and entry visas and everything.
It's so easy to go to South Africa now, just so you know. All right.
Okay. All right, Lisa, 10%.
Okay.
Okay, I'll let you see. But I'll take Miles. No, I'm not done with Miles at all, to answer your question. Miles is me. It's my alter ego. I wrote it in first person, and I have changed, I've evolved, and I don't mind continuing to explore that. But I would still also like to continue to write these other, Emily Snow.
The side hustle to the sideways, right?
Well, I could write one, then the other, because there's so many stories in the archival world. And I know archivists watching this. I mean, probably Kate would hate me to say this, but I could see myself even writing one with another archivist and then another with another archivist or whatever. But, she'll probably say, no, I'm the one who got you started. But
don't do that.
No, don't.
You had an interesting comment, something in the novel where it talked about the Smithsonian and the archives in the Smithsonian, and we only see 2% of, and there's like an immense.
Well, there's what's called the dark archive, and I know this gentleman is listening. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's a digital preservationist, and I think he had a lot of stuff that he was putting into the dark archives that didn't even have a finding aid. He just had a notebook. And I said, are you kidding me? What happens if you die? Or he said, well, they're gonna have to get my notebook. So it's out there on servers and you can go find it. So imagine that the stuff that gets put, because I hate to bring up Richard Nixon, but he would have probably still be a president back then had he not wanted to hold on to those memories and those tapes. Everyone wants to hold on to almost anything, and archivists really sit right at that. I just can't believe that they're underrepresented in film and TV. There was a guy, I actually went to an archivist, a Society American Archivist convention one year because I wanted to meet some archivists, and there was a guy who did a seminar on the representation of archivists, librarians, and curators in movie and TV, and it was the most woeful representation. In fact, he admitted, he goes, I don't really have much of a seminar, folks. Well, if the archivist is made, it's an 8-episode limited series, and she's Lisa knows, she's a hero.
Yeah.
And she did it, she didn't do it with a man. She wasn't anything. She did it with her mind. She did it in crossing boundaries, crossing ethical boundaries, all those things, and that's what I've done in my life. I've literally taken risks. I've crossed, and I take it from people too, after Sideways, I had to hear it from a lot of people. And then you hopefully, and so maybe I'm like Emily in that way, Lisa, I was redeemed. I feel like she's redeemed at the end for the ending brings me to tears personally.
Yeah, it's really just this beautiful kind of circular journey back at the ending.
Which Kara was mentioning kind of the same thing, and a lot of when we were talking genres earlier in the conversation, and a lot of those genres, the turning point of the drama comes when somebody consults an archive.
Yeah. I think that there's so much in that world, and all these archives. I no doubt there's some drudgery, in the profession, and they have to deal with their supervisors, and a lot of them are, dunderheads and making bad decisions and whatever. And we could get into another whole discussion. And in fact, in March on the 8th floor, the university is going to hold a special event for me. And I said, okay, we're going to make it a wine tasting. We'll bring my wines. And I don't want it to be a book signing, but I want it to be a convocation of archivists. I want to talk about these ethical issues, about content. There's so much content coming out. What are the decisions we're making about what we're going to do with this content? There's probably another interesting issue in this climate we live in. They're probably going back into archives and maybe scrubbing them or putting restrictions on certain things to protect that legacy, because that legacy might be making a lot of money, but gosh, they said something, wrong, whatever. There's a lot of interesting issues, and archivists are really, but the main thing that they are is they are preservers of the historical record. And I'm going to misquote the famous Santayana quote, but, if we don't pay attention to history, we risk, repeating history. And in this day and age, with these threats of totalitarianism and whatever, why aren't we looking? And archivists are at the front line of that. To me, maybe I sound crazy. They're thrilling characters. I'm sick of cops. I'm sick of doctors and lawyers.
There's a really funny comment from Karen, though. She says regarding archival representation on film, and we always look so frumpy too.
They look frumpy. They got glasses on, and then they take a ruler and they slap it down. Quiet, maybe that's more a librarian. No, I mean, I have someone who's really, she's basically a private investigator. She's really smart, and and I like what Lisa said, that, she really gets swept up in a mystery that really, tests. And I mean, she's put in, she makes the choice to put herself in a conflictual state that really she's risking a lot, and in fact, at the end, she's really risking a lot, I mean, she goes deep, and that's classic mysteries, though. They often start with, not just a dead body, but a missing person. I love Ross McDonald and other people, but it always builds and leads and goes up to the hierarchy and high up in power. And so there is a parallel to there, Lisa, I think, in those kind of mysteries, which I've steeped myself in over my life. But I love, and really, she's an adult Nancy Drew in many ways.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. In incredible danger, but also emotional danger, psychological danger. I think that was the thing that, I just found so fascinating. And that, the ethical boundaries and crossing them, and for what reason.
Well, I mean, she has a grand mal panic attack and drives herself to the hospital. And by the way, that's right out of my life. That was me.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of personal stuff in there, but and it was for me, just to get away from wine, to get away from wine country, to get away from Miles, and to go into another world, and to write something that I thought, got into deeper thematic stuff. It's not so much, what really happened with this affair, but, these deeper kind of ethical issues. And also, like you said, Lisa, the creative issues that the two of them were collaborating. I mean, I don't want her to be his muse. That's not what it is. They were equal. They were equal partners in this. And in many ways, I mean, Kate and I were, just fictionally, but we were equal partners in the writing of this. She had a lot to do with what we're talking about right now. She's, without having her come to that dinner that night and offer to take me down into the steps, she could have just said, whatever. I never would have written this book in a million years. I would never have thought to write this book.
Kate, if you're watching.
Yeah, bravo, Kate.
Bravo. Bravo, Kate. Karen has a question about, she's excited to give the audio a chance. When you were talking back at the audio, how many voices were auditioned before choosing Caroline for that? Do you know?
Well, it's funny, my Sideways, they didn't send me audition tapes, but I actually just wrote an article about it, and I hope it'll get published, but they sent me 6. And, and right off the bat, I kind of honed it down. Actually, I gave them immediately to Kate, and she said, definitely Caroline Hewitt. And I said, well, I'm between her and this other woman. But then I looked her up, and just her background and actually what impressed me, she went to ACT in San Francisco. So she's a theater actress. She did a play adaptation of Howard's End, which is a film that I actually love quite a bit. I was really impressed by that, and also just listening to her voice, but I really wanted, and also that she wanted to talk to me. You don't get to talk to your audiobook narrator ever. And we had a 2-hour Zoom, and we talked about the different voices and how you're going to do it. I wasn't trying to direct her. I just wanted to know. And she was glad that I was willing to engage her and wanting, because they make choices when they're in there, how they're going to play a voice. And an audiobook badly narrated can take you out of a book. A man doing a woman's voice in a high falsetto or something. I mean, that's a bad example. They go histrionic, they go affected. And when they're really good, they can take a mediocre book and hoist it to Himalayan heights. And in fact, there are people who look for certain audiobook narrators.
I do.
And I didn't know that. Yeah. And so this is what I said to Blackstone, I want to be involved in this choice because it is a long novel. It is a big obligation. I hope that doesn't turn people off. But I think the audiobook will sweep you away in a different way. I hope,
So audiobooks, yeah, there definitely has a research. I mean, people are taking longer walks now. So there's an audiobook, and traffic's back in San Diego. So we're back to
Yeah, I wouldn't know because see, I wake up and I just walk 20 feet to my computer and then
Well, we're gonna wrap it up here.
Okay.
Just a couple more little things. Somebody's asking though, bringing it back to wine. So Carol wants to know what stores in SoCal sell your wine.
no, it's not, it's actually on the East Coast and the Midwest right
Oh.
now, but we're just about to do a deal with Wine Access. So note Wine Access, they are an internet, you can buy it online, internet, and I think they're going to take it on. And so then you could just go to Wine Access and you could just order directly from them. So,
Okay, excellent.
but then I've also got wines coming from New Zealand already too. So
There we go. Lisa, when I talked about your in your bio when I was reading it, it says you're working on your second novel. Is there anything that you want to tell us or can tell us about that?
South Africa, 1960s and 1970s, two young women, one black, one white, dealing with the fallout of the political choices their fathers make.
Wow.
yeah. And it's going to be a powerful novel given
I
your,
still got to hang out in South Africa a little bit longer with my writing.
Wow.
maybe you need to go there and write it there, Lisa.
I can't, Rex. It's a funny thing. I can't write close to home. Like if I go to South Africa for any extended period of time, I'll probably write an American story. There's something about the distance that I like. It's the exact kind of opposite of you. It's interesting, you know?
Yeah, no, I wrote Sideways entirely in a tasting room. No, I'm kidding.
And Rex, for you, you said you have some sideways things that you're working on. Are you working on a next Archivist thing, or you have an idea?
Well, I mean, if this one takes off, yeah, I already have the idea for something I want to do. And, I don't know if you know I could throw it out. It may not be what I do, but the Elena Ferrante, the Neapolitan. Well, Elena Ferrante is a pseudonym, but actually it was a man. And and somebody discovered it. So I want to do a fictional version because something Lisa was bringing up about authorship and whatever, that's something that interests me. Something else about climate change too, that maybe something is discovered in an archive, a closed archive that they knew back in the 60s was, and I really, because that's something that really interests me. Again, archivists, they stand right there at that precipice, and to me, I'm trying to romanticize it a little bit because I want people to realize it's an exciting profession. Bear in mind, the archival ranks of archivists is going to grow by 300% by, I think, 2030. That I just read in the New York Times. I mean, with all this content out there, it is a burgeoning profession,
Well, and the other thing too is that it's got to take on a whole different thing because there's not a lot of physical. It's all this digital. So it's like, what do you do?
That gets into a whole, and that's what our convocation in March will be down in San Diego, talking, what do we do with email? What do we do with text? I mean, this is all content, and and we, want to preserve that. And they are about, I mean, kind of their thumb is in the dike in some ways, but it's about preserving the historical record. And it's going to be about choices. What do you choose to preserve? But if we don't, if we just let it go, I fear for, where the future, because
and speaking of your thing about Elena Ferrante, you saw the thing in the news about the 3 Spanish writers, the male writer. That was a really, so kinds of fun stuff going on. Listen, you two, it has been a wonderful conversation. We could go on, and I swear I do want to have you back on and talk coffee and wine in San Diego. So I'm seeing something else in our future.
Let's do a Warwick's wine tasting. I'll send wine out for free to everybody who wants to be involved.
I love it.
And we can talk literature, content, archives, and coffee and wine. And I'm happy to do it, Julie.
I'm holding you to it. Lisa, thank you. Rex, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
See you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Good night, everybody.